I think it goes back, you just said it, right? And especially you working, in the front lines of HR, where you hear those stories about the folks that come along and they request, $1,000 bump on their salary or whatever, and it gets denied and they leave. But I don't think, especially folks out of HR, realize how expensive it is to get someone back into that seat. And not only,
Welcome to the Human Capitalist Podcast. I am Trent Cotton, your host and human capitalist. Ask yourself, is your HR organization future-proof? Well, we are going to dig into that very topic in this episode. In this podcast, we are going to tackle all of the topics that keep business owners and HR professionals up at night, from AI automation to transforming your workforce to meet the needs of the future. So, if you have employees, you're going to want to follow along and take a lot of notes. So with that, buckle up, get ready. It's time to dig into this episode and transform you into a human capitalist. Let's go. Hi there, Trent Cotton, the human capitalist, and today I am joined by Ethan Collins. He is an account executive at OpenComp, a company that builds compensation decision software. Ethan specializes in providing companies with the insights that they need to plan, implement, and communicate competitive compensation plans that will lead to satisfied, engaged employees at a higher growth and productivity. These companies should have higher revenue margin per employee because they hire better, keep people longer, and they get more contributions from them. So just a little interesting fact about Ethan before we get going. Outside of work, he spends much of the summer month tagging sharks in the Northeast for migratory research. So before we get into them, you're going to have to unpack that. That's crazy. Like what? Like just how did you even get into that? That's so funny.
yeah, no, I mean, good question. Thanks for asking. I think before we jump into it, just want to say thanks for having me on today. I'm excited to definitely talk about OpenComp and kind of, the world of people ops and those kind of
Yeah.
things. Yeah, I guess not to go down too much of a rabbit hole. Basically, my dad started doing it when he was in college, had some buddies, and then through that, it was always something that my father and I could do together. And, I think shark population, not to go down a deep rabbit hole, but it's struggling. And, we definitely need some people to kind of get boots on the ground and figure it out because, it snowballs and causes a lot of other issues in, our environment and different things like that. So it's something I'm passionate about and get to do with my dad. So it's a fun summer.
Fun. Oh, that's interesting. It's just whenever I was going through the show notes, I was like, wait a second, we're going to have to really did you apply for this job? What was the job title? I had so many questions whenever I read through that. That's a pretty interesting fact though. All right. So, Ethan, we've talked a little bit, this whole podcast, kind of the topic that we're unpacking is there is a definitive impact of AI on the future of work. And so what I like to do is I like to talk to guests that are on the cutting edge, whether it's through tools or, you're kind of an interesting one because you have a really cool tool, but at the same time, you're really trying to solve a problem and also trying to help HR get ahead of the game for once in something that is very, very complicated, which is compensation. So I had an opportunity to look at the product. It's pretty impressive. But, before we get into the problem that you're trying to solve, how do you view the world of human capital and how is it going to change over the next 1, 5, and 10 years? Because you talk to a lot of people in HR. What are you seeing?
Yeah, no, again, great question. I think when I look at, 1 year out, 10 years out, kind of split it into more of kind of, near term, far term. I think importantly, especially from what we're hearing from a lot of people, when we look in the near term, I really think organizations are really going to start embracing, data-driven decision making, not only when it comes to compensation, but people operations as a whole. And, as you mentioned with AI, I think the use of AI, advanced analytics, things like that are really going to help organizations, not only predict these workforce trends in real time, but, be able to respond very quickly to different talent demands and even build out personalized compensation, structures. We talked to a lot of people where, either they're using some salary survey from 3 years ago that isn't updated, or, they're asking friends in the market that work at other companies what they're paying their folks. And, kind of becomes this finger in the wind thing for, figuring out salaries. And then you scale and the company grows and it just causes so many more issues. And I think, OpenComp as a whole, we're really kind of at the forefront of this change with, making sure that we can enable these companies to, implement those comp strategies that really drive both that employee retention and the business performance. Because as we all know, you got happy employees, they're going to work harder. Everyone's going to benefit from it. Now, when I look at the long term, so, 5, 10 years, I really see, the demand for pay transparency continuing to increase. We've definitely over the last year or two, right? A lot of different regions are starting to release different regulations when it comes to pay transparency. But I think as time goes on and it becomes more at the forefront, that companies are now really going to be not expected, but they're going to have to be transparent when it comes to compensation. And it's going to be part of their brand. And with that, to get there, they're going to have to adopt these tools that, utilize AI and, are really real time products to make sure that they are having those competitive and equitable pay practices moving forward. We already see it with folks all the time where, they've got to go to LinkedIn and post that job post, and you'll see it for yourself. I'm sure you have. You'll go there and you'll see some job posts that it's like, you know, 15 to $300,000 for a job post on LinkedIn. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, they did that to check a box, but no one is looking at that and being like, oh, okay, like that's a great range. I know exactly where I'm going to fall in there. So I think not only is the clarity around pay transparency, but it's going to force companies to really get in front of it. And not only for their hiring goals, but also it becomes part of their brand. So I guess short term, long term, is not only from, what I've heard, but what I think we're going to see going forward.
That's some really good insight. And I am neck deep in compensation. It's that time of year where we're looking at pay scales, looking at bonus plans, trying to make sure that you're competitive, but not pricing yourself out of the market. So, it's a pretty timely conversation, at least for me as a HR executive. It's top of mind. What are what are some of the AI trends that you're watching very closely, and why?
Yeah, no, again, another great question. I think a big thing for me when I look at AI, especially within comp, is essentially the movement from more of static analysis to this real time, more adaptive analytics. I think, we look back 5, 10, 20 years ago when we needed to go out and get market data, right? A lot of it was these, legacy salary surveys, which, are great solutions. But if you don't stay up to date on that and you hold on to that for 2 to 3 years, right, that data can already be stale. And when we can now move to where we actually are analyzing this real time data, not only does it help with just speed for making decisions, but again, makes that pay transparency of being fair, allows us to just stay agile and just really be competitive in these evolving markets because things are just constantly changing. So to pull it back to the AI part, I think it's more moving from kind of that static analysis to looking at more real-time insights and advanced analytics.
I think whenever when we chatted, I told you the story of I was recruiting. It was after 2010, and I was recruiting for a bank at the time, and we were trying to staff credit risk. So on the commercial side, the underwriters, the risk officers, the portfolio managers. And if you remember that right about that time, there was a ton of banking regulations that came out of the whole 2008 debacle, and that's what banks were trying to staff to. So what's happening is the huge demand for that talent drove up the price. And I remember going to compensation saying, hey, these salary bands you gave me, they're not market compatible. And they would always point to as a Tower Watson and, and some of these others, like that's what we have on the survey. And I said, well, how old is that? 18 months. And so I literally, every candidate that I talked to, I had an access database that I built to keep up with all of my candidates. So I just started tracking their salaries and tracking how many years of experience. And I had to go after probably 100 interviews and go and sit down with compensation and say, this is the real world. The market has shifted and your information is way behind. So, hearing about a product like OpenComp is it's like, where was this in my life earlier? So kind of let's switch the gear a little bit to talking about OpenComp. One of my favorite questions to ask any vendor that I talk to is, what problem are you trying to solve?
Yeah, no. So when we look at the problem that we're trying to solve, right, at OpenComp, we're looking to really address the challenge of, ensuring unbiased, competitive, and transparent compensation while helping, those HR, people op teams, comp professionals really feel confident in their planning and how they communicate these different pay programs in these decisions, right? Our objective for individuals that are using OpenComp for their, comp decision making is them leaving their analysis on the product and saying, all right, like we finally know what it feels like to get paid right. It is a hard thing to do, and everyone's still trying to figure it out. But what we like, and the greatest feedback that we hear from our customers is like, we can get into the outdated surveys, the spreadsheet wars, things like that. But it's like, not only did this save us time, but we actually feel confident behind what we're doing because we have that real-time data. We're setting up our different, maybe, tiered structures or a local strategy versus a geo strategy, different things like that. And just hearing that, like, we finally have the confidence to stand behind when we are having these hard conversations with folks where, they do come to us because they hear their buddy, is getting paid $20,000 more than them. But, they found that on some website that was self-reported data, and like, I didn't come up with this line. Someone told me, but it was, when you ask someone how much they get paid, they tell you what they want to be making, not what they're actually making. But and
Guilty.
again, yeah.
I've done that before.
um, but it is, and even like I mentioned the spreadsheets, where it's like, not only you have that outdated market data that you may be using to basically build the base of everything, which is going to snowball. But we talk to so many folks that are still, they're stuck in the spreadsheets, and like, for some smaller companies, right, it can work. But we'll talk to folks that have, 700-800 employees, and they're like, we built ranges and ran a merit cycle in spreadsheets this year. And, don't get me wrong, some very technical folks have showed me the spreadsheets they've built, and they are quite, they're really cool to see. Nothing that I could ever build out. But
Right.
you know, you add an extra zero by accident, you send that spreadsheet to someone that doesn't have knowledge of spreadsheets, and they think that they're clicking into something, and next thing you know, the whole spreadsheet's ruined, right? And we push that through. That employee that was supposed to get a merit increase ends up not getting it. They end up leaving. They don't say anything. They're mad because of their comp. And now we got to spend all that money to fill that position again. So kind of to bring it back in, right? Our goal, empower companies to build and maintain equitable comp practices that align with market trends, align with their company goals, and really give the business, those real-time insights, those analytics, so that we can help them, navigate just that very complex world of compensation, retain that talent, and just scale effectively.
So I'm going to AI next. How are you leveraging AI in not just your product, but also the roadmap? Because I was listening to an interview with OpenAI's CEO, and he said, there's kind of two lines of thought. There's one that we can build products and services that are interact with AI as it stands right now, or we can build assuming that it's going to continue its evolutionary trajectory over the next several years, and we're going to build for that level. Like, where are you all currently, and kind of what's on the roadmap, or what can you share in terms of the product?
Yeah. So when we look at like currently, right, the AI that we're utilizing is essentially the process of taking the raw data that we get from our customers and turning that into, actionable insights, right? It's like not only looking at, that data that we're receiving from our customers, but using that AI to apply different filters. Like, when we look at the, amount of demand for different roles in the market, or when we look at, evolving costs of labor and different things like that, of using that to run this analysis so that we can get to a point knowing that there are multiple factors that play into this, and utilizing that AI to bring it all under one roof so we can make those complex decisions with the aid of, that technology, so that I've already said it a few times, we get to that point where those companies can use our tool to make those as real-time, quick decisions. Now, when we look down the road, I think it's going to depend on a few things, how we continue to, implement AI within the tool. But I think it just opens up the chances of, you know, different areas of growth when we look into the future. I think, again, as we've mentioned, with a lot of times you may be analyzing a lot of data from the past, but if we can really get into this real time of seeing while things are changing and being able to predict, not predicting the future, but being able to get ahead of different obstacles that we think these companies are going to face, and just make things, not only smoother for them, but be able, again, going back to speed and just accurate insights that are going to allow them to make those correct decisions, increase revenue, happier employees. Hopefully everyone can ride off into the sunset. They can, do as great as they can, and everyone's happy.
Makes complete sense. And, the thing that I like about AI, even on some of the basic Gen I chatbots, whether it's Gemini or ChatGPT is they've gotten to the point where you can go and take these massive data amounts and put it in there. And sometimes I just really enjoy going, all right, bot, what is the data telling me? Because, if you go in there and you ask a specific question, of course, it's going to leverage the data and give you the answer. But sometimes I like to start very general and just say, what is the data? What is the story that the data is telling me that I probably don't even know what question to ask? And I would imagine that compensation and the amount of volatility in the market right now, I would imagine that that would be something that AI would really excel in a product like yours is not, like you said, not forecasting or not telling the future, but it could at least say, based off of this information, this is what I would forecast. And it gives you some kind of estimation of what to prepare for.
Yeah. No, and again, not to go down a non-comp, non-HR rabbit hole, but like even we talk about, ChatGPT and, OpenAI
Mm-hmm.
and AI and the things they're doing, I was a late adopter to it. I started utilizing it probably 6 months ago, and like just seeing in that time, because I have like the paid version that like really
Yeah.
kind of updates that memory, learns how you speak, things like that. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm very excited to see over the next, handful of years where that tool goes in both focused in HR and comp, but also just in general. I think it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I've got a Mac, and I use the app for ChatGPT sometimes, and you can, of course, talk to it. So it's just great. I don't feel like I'm talking to myself. I'm actually asking questions and getting answers back. So it makes me feel a little bit better about myself. But yeah, I mean, I have I have been about AI since 2020. I remember going on Matt Alder's podcast, and I think it's Recruiting Future. And I described my utopia of recruiting at the time, of an AI helping me do this and scheduling and evaluating. And it's something that I can go and do some heavy analysis on. So, being able to leverage tools like I've really gotten into more Gemini's Gem, which is kind of their version of a custom GPT in Google. And I've got all kinds of things. And it's more just sometimes to handle a lot of the mundane work, the routine work, and some of the basic analysis. So I know, I work for an AI company. One of the biggest obstacles that we run into is clients are all about, yes, I know that I need to use AI. I don't know what tool to use. You start talking to them about the tool, and immediately the concern comes up of privacy. How do I protect my information? All of that kind of fun stuff. How do you all approach solving that problem? Or do you even run into it?
I want to understand correctly. And so essentially, when we look at the security aspects of, us
Hmm.
different people's compensation data, how we look at security, is that the
Yeah, or just kind of, or do you run into a lot of HR professionals who are not maybe as on the forefront of AI? Their initial thing is AI is going to take all of my information and give it over to somebody else. And that's something happened last week whenever I was talking to an HR professional. I was like, it doesn't quite work that way. Not unless you hit a button that sends it to everybody. But, there's still a lot of education that needs to be done whenever you're talking about AI and about products and services that are handling something as sensitive as compensation. So have you ever run into that, or is that just something that only I'm experiencing in an AI company?
no? I do not. You're
Asking for a friend.
yeah. No, you're not the only one. No, we have it a handful of times where people definitely are. They have their worries or their concerns, and I think it goes to back to AI in general, at least in these last couple of years of still kind of becoming very, very mainstream. But
Hmm.
there definitely are the times where people get where like, where's this stuff going? What are we doing with it? And when I look at it specifically to open comp, and I'm sure with probably data that you guys are handling, like
Oh, yeah.
we take our security very seriously, right? And it's not
Hmm.
if your company, thousands of other companies, if they were doing these mysterious bad things in the background, right? They probably wouldn't be operating still.
True. Very true. But it's
So
hard to get over that with clients. They get all hyped up about AI possibly automating or analyzing or doing all that, but then whenever it comes into data protection and all of that, sometimes I wish they were worried about data integrity as much as they were worried about data security. Just sometimes you get the data, it's like, what in the hell? No wonder your whole shop is a shit show, is because the data is just none of it's talking to each other. So anyway, we could chase the whole data conversation for a while, but like who are you finding are the types of clients that are most drawn to your particular product?
Yeah, no, I think when we look at, who we best serve, right? And I already somewhat said this, but it goes back to companies that are looking to do three things, right? Plan, implement, and communicate their compensation plans, right? So
Hmm.
doesn't need to be everyone looking to do all three. We work with a lot of folks that are doing all three, but we understand when we look at some of our different clients, every business is in a different stage of, their compensation journey, right? Maybe you've got a startup that's only got a handful of employees and their need right now is just getting a hold of, accurate market data because they
Hmm.
understand it. They don't get it right now. And it is more of a finger in the wind thing for their first, say, 10, 15 employees. Well, once they scale and they get to, 30, 40, 100, and then it comes to that point where, if you started in the beginning and I had the same role as you, but back then they didn't have good data and you're getting paid, make up the numbers, $200,000 and I'm getting 150. And it's like, well, why am I getting 150 if this person's getting 200? It's like, well, now we've adapted and brought on this real-time data and we have it. So we have a lot of folks, it's like, okay, we just need to plan things, start from scratch, and then build into everything else. But then we also have our companies that can be in tech, can be in completely different other industries that, they've got ranges built out, they're good to go, but they're struggling with that merit cycle, right? They're doing everything in spreadsheets. The automation of it is a mess. They can't figure it out and they need to make things more efficient. So again, to go back to it, it's like not only companies are again looking, plan, implement, communicate, but we're also not pigeonholed into, working with folks that, are in these, high growth tech industries. I think as compensation tools have come out, even looking at probably what you guys are doing in AI, where I think a lot of people make the assumption that this is a software tool for other high growth and only for other, high growth software companies where yes, we work with a lot of, tech companies, but there's still the need to get compensation right in any industry you look at. For the majority of businesses, right, that payroll is their most expensive thing on the balance sheet. So why shouldn't that be something that they are very focused on getting right if it's that expensive for them internally? But when we look at again, individuals that we're working in, we work very closely with, HR people teams, finance teams, executives, just again with the goal, right? Good insights for them to attract their best talent, retain their talents, and reward those people fairly.
Makes complete sense. I would almost think that some of your larger enterprise organizations would want this because the cost of retention for them is so incredibly high. And you gave an example of someone just quietly leaving as a result of compensation, and I'm sure there's someone listening that's kind of rolling their eyes, going, "That doesn't happen." It does. It does. I can't tell you how many times I've reached out to an employee who left, 90, 120 days after, and I said, "Okay, hey, look, there's been enough time. You're not going to hurt anyone's feelings. I want to know, why did you leave?" And it was for compensation. And I'll always get frustrated, especially if they're a high performer, and go, "Why didn't you say something? Why didn't you come to me? I could have gone to bat for you." It is just, for some people and even some cultures, it's a very sensitive subject that is just easier, and you save more face by just leaving quietly. And the cost of acquisition is so high, to me, it would almost be like this product pays for itself. If it's giving you the information that it needs, or the information that you need in real time, and you're able to do some competitive analysis, to me, it's just kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah, and I think it goes back, you just said it, right? And especially you working, in the front lines of HR where you hear those stories about the folks that come along and they request, $1,000 bump on their salary or whatever, and it gets denied and they leave. But I don't think, especially folks out of HR, realize how expensive it is to get someone back into that seat. And not only how,
But what I love is whenever the hiring manager, whenever you go and you have to recruit that role, and the price in the market is 10 to
it's,
12 to 15,000, they're like, "Well, such and such left and they were making 80." I know. And now they're making what we're trying to bring people in. So if you had just paid that $5,000, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. And that's even before you get into the cost of hire, the cost of rehire, the cost of training. I mean, it's just, to me, it is one of the most absurd conversations that I have to have as a HR professional is, okay, it costs less to retain than it does to rehire someone.
Yeah. And I think it also goes back to, essentially the basis of our product, right? With the market data, where
Mhm.
you have, and again, I'm sure you've experienced where you'll have that hiring manager recruiter comes in. It's like, well, they wanted $30,000 more than, the band that I was said I could offer. They think that person's ridiculous for asking for that extra money, but then you backtrack it and find out that the data that they were using to offer on that role was, from a survey 3 years ago or from an online website that's all self-reported. And it's like, if you don't get that base right, it just causes so many more issues as we continue and scale and grow.
Yeah, and you're being nice. I'll address the elephant in the room. You're going a route that it can almost be forgivable. They're using old data. Maybe the manager hasn't really been keeping up with what's going on in the market. I can forgive that. What I can't forgive are these cheap ass managers that I'm just going to pay what I think it should be because I actually had a manager one time. He and I were going round and round. He wanted this candidate bad, and I was trying to get someone else promoted within his organization. He was just fighting me tooth and nail on every single compensation. And finally, I just said, what is the deal? I said, what is the driving force behind this need to fight? And it was because he started out at the bottom of the company and worked his way up, and he felt that everybody should do that. I said, that was 40 years ago. The market has changed. You need to upgrade. So God bless. Every time, like compensation, I love going into the strategy aspect of it, but sometimes these conversations just make the hair on the back of my neck stand up because I have to keep composure, but inside it's like I'm the Hulk going, "Why are we having this conversation?" It's crazy. What are some trends that you're seeing in kind of the compensation world? I mean, are you seeing certain sectors moving, too far to the right or paying more, paying less, or are there any trends out there?
I'd say for a lot of our larger clients, one of the big trends and issues that we're working, again, solving for them right now is, especially with COVID, remote work now, of
Hmm.
not only planning a fair remote compensation strategy, but we're also seeing, a lot of work with global companies of, figuring out that right balance of, do we want to take a true local strategy? And so maybe our folks in Portugal are getting paid Portugal rates, and then our folks in, Texas or Massachusetts, whatever it may be. Or maybe do we go ahead and do, like a tiered rate where we apply geo differentials to different areas and go off that? Because one of the things we're working with helping a lot of, when we look globally for clients, is when we look at the data, we see a split of folks that are working again. Portugal is the first place that popped in my head. I got to go there earlier this summer. It was amazing.
So jealous. Way
And
to just kind of work that in. I appreciate that.
yeah, got to go with my mom. Shout out, mom. But when we look at the data, it's twofold where you have folks that have moved there for, and again, I'll call it the U.S., but you have folks maybe work for these U.S. tech companies that are then getting, they're going to Portugal and say they're opening up an office over there, whatever it may be. But then we've got two ways of looking at the data where you have the individuals that have moved there and are getting paid the rates of where they move from, maybe with a minor geo differential, but then you also have the rates that folks that are born and raised that are getting paid true local markets to that area, in finding that blend of essentially that perfect match so we can still have that fair and equitable, pay strategies across the board.
That makes sense. So, what all countries? I mean, you mentioned global. So, I'm assuming that you have global tables for several countries, or is there like certain regions that, yes, we've got like 80% of EMEA, or like, what does that look like if I'm a global HR leader?
Yeah, so currently we have access to it's either 46 or 47 countries globally. When we look at kind of the spread of that with our data, again, North America, UK, Europe, India, Philippines. We're building out to Latin America, currently building out. That's another one that we work with more of a consultative approach with a lot of our customers, because sure you know, if you look at, certain areas down there with kind of the states of their economies, with inflation, different things like that, it can be challenging to really track that. I think it was, you'll have to
Who are
fact.
you telling? That is my world.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
you,
we're US and LATAM, and I've got a spreadsheet that I keep looking at all the different countries and like 17 different economic factors of what's going on in the market, so that way we can make sure that we're being equitable in our pay and our hiring strategy. So yeah, I feel your pain.
yeah, but yeah, no. So to go back to global, we're yes, mid 40s when we look at countries globally. So and that is constantly growing as again we bring on more clients. That range is continuing to grow.
Awesome. So like you go into a new country, or you pick up a new country, where do you get the information? Is it just scraping the web, or do you all have kind of like a protocol of going and validating the market data?
Yeah. So when we look at how we acquire our data, it is ingested directly through our customers' HIRS and their PEOs. So we connect their accounts through an API that then pulls in, aggregates, anonymizes that data. Now they can obviously, analyze all of their data within the tool. But when we pull that data, it then gets pulled into our data set. And then we use a couple different factors to analyze that data to make sure, again, if we got to remove outliers, trying to separate maybe those international folks that are getting paid local rates versus a geo differential based on the states to basically come up with that market data where we can make those one-off searches. Now, when we look at growing into different countries, that essentially takes us time to come up with a high confidence value of customers that have folks in those regions. So we will not produce any data in the tool that we do not have, high confidence for. So it's not us
Cool.
online and pulling out because we want to make sure, again, going back to that real time, advanced analytics where what we are showing to these customers, we can confidently stand behind.
Very
Because
interesting.
with, online resources, we look that way, right? Can't always trust it. You can go to LinkedIn, but you see those job posting that goes back to it's like $10,000 to $500,000, right? Can't.
I don't trust anything out of LinkedIn, to be honest with you, from a data standpoint. I just don't. And it's interesting. Correct me if I'm wrong. When we did the demo, there was like a confidence factor in it that kind of told you. Yeah, I thought that was fantastic. Of okay, well, this is 70% of the way there, or whatever it is. Kind of helps me play a little bit less in the game of Russian roulette, which is what I feel like whenever we're doing comp sometimes. So I'm sure that there would be people that want to reach out and do a demo with you. It's spent like 30 minutes on the phone. I think I told you, don't even get into the analytics side or the reporting side because I'll keep you for a day. I love data, and just the little preview that I got was fantastic. But if you had to pick like maybe your top two or three features that whenever you're going over this with people, they just go, whoa, like their mind's blown. What would those features be?
Yeah, I think again, I'll break it into the three steps and I'll go back to the plan, implement, and communicate aspect of things. So when it comes to planning, favorite part is going to be what we call our market analysis tab. So if you could imagine, as I showed you when we spoke, we have an area where you can go in and let's say you are a hiring manager and you need to hire a software engineer with, 2 years of experience in San Francisco to get, again, that 25th, 50th, 75th percentile for base salary, total cash and equity. Running those one-off searches is great. But what I really like is we have what we call our market analysis tab, where when we actually ingest in those employees through the HIRS, we will run that analysis for you so we can break it down by, individual contributors, departments, company at large to see based on, again, that title, that level, that location within the industry that you're in to see how we are paying to the market. Because you look at, go back to your large salary surveys, you get that spreadsheet. If you want to run an analysis on the entire company, you got to, okay, here's the code for the job title, scroll down to page 87, here's the range. In
Yeah,
just minutes, we've got that full layout for you. We can jump in and say, okay, who are the folks we're paying under the 10th percent of market that we may want to kind of put the red flag up and have a conversation about. And just the speed to those insights, I think is great. Second part of this actually comes into when we work with folks to actually build out their ranges. We talk to a lot of people. And again, I'm sure when you do it in spreadsheets, not only is it not a fun time, but it can take a very long time to build out, whatever formula you got, get that market data from that spreadsheet in 4 steps of us working to decide essentially your geographic strategy, where you want to sit with target market percentiles, the widths of your range, and then if we need to group folks, we'll be able to create your ranges essentially within minutes. A couple weeks ago, I had one of our customers, there were 350 employees. We worked with them. We had their ranges built for all their positions within 45 minutes. So once we can go through and essentially make sure we benchmark everyone correctly and have their leveling aligned, we just need to answer those 4 questions, and we've created ranges for your entire organization.
Yeah. So like, let's just stop right there. Like, if you are in a, kind of small to medium sized company, especially those of us that have come from large companies where had their own compensation department, and then we come into something that's like, hey, congratulations, you're the one person HR show, compensation, talent acquisition, everything. Like, just think about how long it would take for you to go and develop all of those, doing analysis and all of that. And, 45 minutes, that's mind blowing.
Yeah. And again, yeah. So that's once we get, essentially what we'll do is, again, we'll go through, run a benchmarking exercise. We will make sure everyone's leveled. Once that's done, then in about 45 minutes, we can create those ranges for you. And even to go back to what you said, like, we speak to a lot of folks definitely on the smaller side when we look at, company employee count, where it is that one man, one woman team who, and I think especially for folks maybe in sales that work in the comp field, you can easily forget that these HR folks wear a lot of hats within HR, and it's not like they're just doing comp the whole entire day. And then once you think it's one person that maybe in a small company is looking over, operations and HR, and like they don't have 3 weeks to block off to do a market analysis, build ranges, and run a merit cycle. Like they just don't have the time.
Not just the time, but honestly, Ethan, a lot of us that did not grow, even if we grew up in HR in large organizations, we have compensation, and they're kind of like this little ivory tower. You can't break into it. But whenever you come in and you get out of that environment into a small to medium sized company, you're expected that, hey, you work for a large company, you had a compensation department, you should know how to do compensation. And there couldn't be something further from the truth. Even the compensation theories or best practices or something, I know whenever I took my current job, I had to do a lot of research on compensation. And thank God I had a lot of friends in the compensation world that made that learning accelerated. But that's a luxury that I had that I don't know that a lot of people in my position would have. So that's definitely a problem or an area that in my mind, open comp would kind of alleviate that. Sorry, it sounds like I'm selling your product, but it's just, to me, it's just,
Keep going.
yeah, keep going, right? Yeah, don't send me a check. But
Yeah.
no, I mean, there are some very valid reasons why, I wanted to start with what problem you're trying to solve, because I do think that anyone listening who has to deal with compensation, who does not have a compensation background, this tool would be fantastic for them. So sorry, I keep interrupting. I get excited about this kind of stuff.
No, you're good. You're good. And I was going to say again, also like kind of beyond those ranges to maybe pick out 2 more things. And I know we were talking about the merit cycles and running, doing that with spreadsheets. I think it is not only extremely refreshing, but running a merit cycle without having to deal with spreadsheets and being actually able to, throughout this entire process, as let's say you are a manager or, VP director, of being able to monitor while that merit process is going on, to be able to step in and say, okay, we're going down the wrong direction, you're going over budget, and track things real time. Because you hear these stories where, again, you've got the manager that gets sent a spreadsheet and it performance review scores, and that you tell them they've got $1,000 for merit increases, and they don't have any comp history. They may have some bias. Who knows? They go in there and they're like, well, I really actually want to give everyone a $5,000 increase, and it's going to be $60,000. And that gets sent in a spreadsheet with 15 different tabs. It goes all the way up the chain. And then they've got to turn it around and send it back down and restart because we don't have the money to do that. And I think one of the
Yeah.
really cool things with our merit tool is what we call our executive summary, where not only after the fact will we create essentially a one pager to show you for, how much money was spent, employees, how they moved in their range, average increase by performance. but you also have the ability as a manager or anyone else in the approval flow to go in there as things are going on to monitor that and make sure that people are, staying within their limits. So we don't have to spend this extra time of going back to square one once this whole process has been completed. And again, just goes back to making everything, more effective, more efficient, and happier employees at the end of the day.
Makes complete sense. So I will put in the show notes the best way to get a hold of you. And if anyone that's listening or watching is kind of like, I'm struggling with some of this stuff, just 30 minutes. What do you have to lose? Do a demo and check it out. I was blown away. And actually, I think you're one of like maybe 2 or 3 compensation modules that I've demoed, and the others I just kind of go, oh my God, this is boring. This one I was really involved in, which is why I wanted to bring you on here, get everybody else as excited as I was about the product. So, all right, let's go ahead and bring it home. We'll do some rapid fire. You ready for that?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So what is a book that changed your perspective on business or HR?
Yeah, so I think book that changed my perspective on business, and I actually need to go back and reread it because it's been a couple of years. But I go back to Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. A lot of people know the 10,000 hour rule, but when I look at sales and business in general for my role, going back to like LinkedIn for a second, you go on there every day and you see a million people posting how they've, figured out how to do X, Y, and Z, or like just do this or just do this. And then, you got 2 people that have got all these followers that are people are liking it, being like, yes, but both of them are saying the complete opposite different
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And I realize, especially in business and, the world of working in the comp space where you're selling to people, there is, no matter how much you want to do things, there's never going to be one silver bullet to get things done. And you've got to try different things. You got to work hard. And I go back to the fact that it's like, I'm just getting started. I've got a whole life of doing something like this. Like things are going to get better, but you got to, put that time in and just keep working hard. So I think that goes back to both, business, personal life, all that kind of stuff.
That's a great one. It reminds me of my CEO one time. He said, they should have like a track in college that if you want to become a CEO one day, that you have to take like an entire year's worth of psychology. He goes, the accounting and the marketing and all that. He goes, that kind of stuff is not necessarily easy, but it's easier. He goes, it's the psychology of learning your clients, anticipating their market needs, handling your direct reports. He goes, the psychology needs to be done. So yeah, Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell's a fantastic one. What's your favorite podcast or series?
Yeah, when I go podcast wise, if I want to look in the business realm, I think it's How I Built This by Guy Raz. I
Oh.
introduced to the podcast actually back in college. They had us do like a case study on one, and it was the story about how Health Aid Kombucha started, and basically how they started to how and Coca-Cola ended up buying them. But it was a complete, they fell into it. They had no idea. It was, I'll keep this short, but it was, I think it was again, it's been years. I think it was a husband and a wife and a friend that worked together. And I believe
Mm-hmm.
Fridays after work, they'd get together and for an hour come up with business ideas because one day they wanted to start their own business. And I think the husband, and again, we'll have to fact check me on this one, but I think it was the
Yeah.
husband was going bald early and they were doing research trying to figure out a hair supplement for hair growth. And they found that way back, people would use the scobies that were produced when you'd make kombucha and
Mm-hmm.
put that on the head. And supposedly at some point that helped hair rejuvenation. So they were trying to figure out a way to turn that into a lotion, I think it was. And they had all this kombucha that they were just sitting on. And one of their friends had a table at some like farmer's market in LA. And the friend was like, hey, I can't be at the table this weekend. Like, if you want, go down there and sell the kombucha to get rid of it. And in like 2 hours, it was all sold out. And they were like, oh my God, we're on to something.
Wow.
And then they kept going back. And then they got acquired by Coca-Cola for, I forget the exact number, but some like astonishing number. And just goes back to like, just keep trying things. Like, you never know the opportunities that you're going to get. Like, go for every opportunity
Mm-hmm.
you get and see what happens.
Well, and two, I think it's interesting that they were trying to solve one problem. They realized that they, created a product for another one, which is always interesting. All right. So where can people find you if they want to follow up?
Yeah, I think best 2 places to find me will be either through LinkedIn or shooting me an email, which is ethan@opencomp.com. It's just ETHAN@opencomp.com. Those are probably going to be the two best places to reach me.
Awesome. And I always ask, I call this the mic drop session. So what's your one-liner to close out the session? Something that anyone that's watching or listening that they will remember and put into action.
Yeah, I think if I had to throw a one-liner out there, I'd go back to control what you can control. I think both business, personal life, everything, it is easy to get upset about the little things. And a lot of times it's things that you cannot control and you cannot fix. So if you are going to spend your energy on anything, spend it on something you can control, that you can fix, and then you're moving forward and things are getting better.
Yeah, thousands of dollars of personal counseling could have been wrapped up in that one little mic drop statement, because I'm always trying to control things that I can't control. So it's a lesson that I have to learn and remind myself of every day. Well, Ethan, I really enjoyed our conversation and appreciate you taking the time to come on. Anyone listening, make sure you hit him up, ethan@opencomp.com, and check him out on LinkedIn. And remember, if this was interesting to you, it's probably going to be interesting to somebody else, so make sure that you share it. And Ethan, thanks again, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me on. This was a blast. And yeah, no, thank you very much.
All right, sounds great. Talk soon.
All right.
And that is a wrap on another episode of The Human Capitalist. Thank you so much for choosing to tune in and invest your time with me today. I hope that you walked away with some valuable insights and actionable strategies that you can maximize your greatest asset, and that's you. But hey, before you go, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so that way you can stay in the know. The Human Capitalist movement begins with you. If you have some feedback, feel free to leave it. I'll read every comment. I want to make sure that the content that I am delivering is what you want to hear. If you want to connect further, you can find me at my link down below. I'd love to hear from you and continue this awesome conversation. Well, this is Trent Cotton, your human capitalist, and I'm going to sign off. But remember, invest in yourself, own your potential, and keep building your human capital.